And is expected to issue rulings on 2 college affirmative action cases. Legal analysts say the 6-3 conservative majority on the Supreme Court seems ready to stop schools from considering race when it comes to student admissions. Joining us now for more insight is James Brent, who's a politics professor at San Jose State. Good morning to you, James.
Good morning.
So, James, let's start with the simplest question of them all. Why are some against this affirmative action in college admission?
Well, opponents of affirmative action simply believe that racial discrimination is immoral and unconstitutional, whether it helps minorities or whether it hurts them. Famously, in a 2007 case, Chief Justice Roberts wrote, "The way to end racial discrimination is to stop discriminating on the basis of race."
So in general here, there are two themes that ran through the questions from the court's conservatives here. That's the educational diversity can be achieved without directly taking into account race, and that there must be come a time when colleges and universities stop making such distinctions. What are some of the ideas tossed around about achieving diversity without affirmative action among the conservative justices?
Well, we've certainly tried some of those here in California because we ended affirmative action back in 1996. So, for example, one plan that was used was to take the top 3% of students of every high school in the state. And the idea was that that would increase diversity. Another thing that's happening across the nation is that universities are ending their use of the SAT as a criterion for admission because some people see that as racially and culturally biased.
How would that in turn lead to a more diverse admission if you take the affirmative action out of it? Some of the ideas that you tossed around that were done in California, if they were to use those on another level, are those seeing diversity when you adopt those kinds of changes?
Well, not really, actually. The evidence is shown. I mean, we ended affirmative action here in 1996, and the University of California tried to take some of these steps to increase diversity, and it really hasn't worked. There's still a huge gap in African American and Latino admissions compared to their representation in the population in general. So it's very, very hard.
So, James, lawyers representing a conservative student group claim affirmative action policies can lead to discriminating one race over the other. That's one of the groups that brought this case to the Supreme Court. What is their basis for the argument that this could lead to discrimination over one group and another?
Well, it's simply based on the Equal Protection Clause, and again, I think it's a matter of simple. They would argue that it's a matter of simple morality, that if racial discrimination is wrong, it is wrong, and it doesn't matter who it happens to benefit. Now, of course, supporters of affirmative action would argue that that view is too simplistic and that it doesn't take into account the lingering effects of institutional racial discrimination.
Do you think that's something that the justices will consider as they're talking about this? I haven't seen anything. I know that some of the other justices, which I'll get to in a moment, brought something like that up. But is that something that the conservative side will take into account?
Well, it depends. The court does sit around a table and they talk about these things. But by all accounts, in recent years, just like in America generally, the court has become more divided, and they don't really have a meaningful exchange. I mean, we pretty much know who's going to vote which way, and I don't think that any of the liberals are going to change any of the conservatives' minds or vice versa.
Right. That's what we see nowadays just in general. Justice Sotomayor, she said that if you're black, you're more likely to be in an under-resourced school. You're more likely to be taught by teachers who are not as qualified as others. You're more likely to be viewed as having less academic potential. That statement is based on research, but does that have any bearing at all on what the justices are going to be considering in all of this?
Well, that's a really interesting question. Whether or not the justices should be guided by social science research is a real debate, and generally conservatives say that they shouldn't. It should simply be based on the law.
Oh, that is interesting. So we'll see what happens next. And Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson said it would be odd if admissions officers could consider factors like whether applicants were parents, veterans, or disabled, but not if they're members of racial minorities. Is that an argument that could be debated among the justices?
Again, if they were willing to debate, absolutely. But that is an argument that has long been made in support of affirmative action, and yet it hasn't swayed those who oppose it to this point. I don't see it swaying them going forward.
So in your opinion here, just watching this, do you see this falling in line with the makeup of the court?
Yeah, absolutely. Once upon a time, Justice William Brennan said, with 5 votes, you can do anything around here. Well, the conservatives have 6 votes, so they can do anything.
All right. We'll see what happens when the justices issue what they think should happen next. James Brent, political science professor or politics professor at San Jose State. Thank you for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Still to come.